Hello, my name is Jennifer Gilliland, and I'm doing a presentation on the nation Japan, a culturally unique island nation, the nation of Japan. In the early 1990s, humorist Dave Barry once stated in his New York Times best-selling book that I found so funny. I found this quote so funny that I can almost state it from memory. It would be easier to get the entire population of Tokyo to wear matching outfits than it would be to get two randomly selected Americans to agree on pizza toppings. Japan strives to maintain a harmonious society, one where famously the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. For most of my life, this book, Dave Barry Judged Japan, was the sum total of the study that I had done about Japan. That's not to denigrate the book. It is an excellent book, written with keen observations about Japanese society, and also contains a wonderful heartfelt essay about the tragedies in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I highly suggest reading this book. It's a wonderful introduction to Japan society. However, it was written a number of decades ago now. Beliefs, values, and norms in Japan. We'll begin by just looking at religion in Japan, which is in this handy chart, which I did take off an internet image search. Shintoism is slightly half. Buddhism is less than half. In reality, Japanese society sort of mixes these two things in their culture rather than just in their religion. Christianity is less than 1%. As a whole, the society is actually quite secular. The World Atlas states that Shinto is the largest religion in Japan and is actually practiced by a majority of the population. However, a lot of people do not identify themselves as Shintoist. Many practice Shintoism more as a social construct than an actual religion. And Shintoism has to do with how the Japanese see themselves within nature. And it can coexist with other religions, such as Buddhism. According to Hayes, on the website factsandfigures.com, Confucius had a strong effect on Japanese society and was not interested in individual salvation or individual rights. What Confucius cared about was the collective well-being of society. He promoted virtues such as courtesy, selflessness, obedience, respect, diligence, working for a common good, social harmony, and empathy. The code of behavior that he described was based on a harmonious code among the society. Notions of a well-ordered family, a well-ordered state, and a well-ordered world. Under Confucius, the oldest male and the father regarded as unchallengeable authorities. They set the rules, and it is the duty for everyone that's subordinate to them to follow them. In turn, the father or the oldest male is to look out for the family and care for them. Love and respect are principles that are practiced in the context of the family. Confucians do not ascribe to the idea of loving all people equally. Your clan or your group take dominant primary importance. Next, I'm going to talk about the traditional family in Japan, which is comprised of a mother who stays home and cares for the children, and a father who works long hours to support them. Japanese families are not large and are getting less so as time goes on. The mother is very careful to make sure that the children fit in with the other children, and that she fits in with the other mothers, and that their family fits in with the neighborhood. According to the World Atlas, extended family is revered and cared for by the mother. Traditionally, working motherhood has been discouraged, although some gains have been made in this direction, whereas mothers were always stayed home. In modern times, more mothers do work part-time. And so that's no longer considered shocking. According to Bester and Hardacre, women are also primarily concerned with their children's success in school. There is much pressure for children to not fall behind their peers in their schooling. And this picture here is a mother on looks like a small moped type bike, taking her children maybe to school or around town. Children start school very early because they're expected to be learning very early in order to keep up. According to Hayes, the group in Japan is regarded as more important than the individual. Most Japanese are part of some group, either through their work or school or a club, or even part of their neighborhood or community. These groups are central to their lives, and loyalty to the group is often considered the ultimate virtue. Many Japanese view decision-making and responsibility in the terms of Bobobshaki, which is party society, and concern for consensus among the group is paramount. And here is a group of college students in Japan it's an interesting picture. Middle class. Japan is home to one of the world's most wealthy and egalitarian societies. Wealth is spread relatively evenly. 90% of the Japanese refer to themselves as middle class. The gap between the highest and lowest incomes is the smallest among first world nations. According to the World Atlas, economic problems in this century have changed the way that employment works in Japan, which once almost guaranteed life employment. Unemployment is now higher, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a later slide. Communication in Japan. And the information this comes from factsanddetails.com by Jeffrey Hayes. According to the Cultural Atlas at Cultural Atlas SBS.com, individuals in Japan usually act deliberately and with restraint to protect their self-worth and their perception among their peers. Conduct is conservative, and that's the norm. People don't want to stand out or risk losing face by doing something that's out of the ordinary or inappropriate. For many Japanese, the fear of letting down family or society dominates almost everything else. The Japanese language itself influences people's perception of situations and one another. Their language is very formal and observant. Different styles of speech are used for people depending on their status. Natural speech may be used among your peers, but let's say that someone that's older comes into the conversation, then the tone will change to a more respectful and reverent style of communication. Communication is high context and very nuanced, with more implied than being stated overtly. The Japanese famously don't like to create conflict, and so they will avoid giving a negative answer, even if that's the only answer that can be said. So in interacting with the Japanese, it's good to keep in mind that the Japanese will either not speak or say something differently, or even suggest something else rather than making a negative statement. No, we won't do that. No, we can't do that. That sort of thing. They'll divert the conversation some other way. The Japanese have very high regard for manners. Like this right here is just a chart, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is just a chart about how you eat sushi in Japan. It's very regimented. What to say before you eat it, exactly how to pick it up with your chopsticks. I would take a year to eat the sushi in Japan because I can't operate chopsticks very well. But you have to turn the chopsticks around to take it from the plate, and you should never mix your sauces, and you should always eat it just in one bite, and you never raise your food above your mouth, and you should eat every last grain of it, and what you say afterwards. So everything is very spelled out in exactly how you should act in regard to eating just this one thing. Something else that is well known about Japan is bowing, which in business meetings the Japanese know that Americans shake hands, so it can be kind of awkward when they go to shake your hand and you bow to them. But here it shows how much you should bow by degrees. Slight bow, a salute, and a respectful bow. So these are some of the very regimented ways that Japanese look at manners. Modern Japan is in a state of flux. So these are not yesterday's or your grandparents' Japanese teenagers. More and more, the state in Japan is becoming more individualistic. According to Hayes and the World Atlas, traditional values in Japan are breaking down somewhat. The younger generation is much different than its forebears. Women in particular have increasingly chosen not to marry or have children because they prefer to work and to be able to do things for themselves, since working motherhood is not encouraged. Men too have struggled to find employment and feel themselves unworthy of marriage. The result is that too few children are being born, and the population is rapidly aging. Japan is a little bit of a victim of its own success in the individuality department. The world over, young people love anime, manga, Japanese video games. But the young people in Japan, when they pursue this more individualistic lifestyle, they're a bit rejecting the traditional Japanese societal views. Of course, that means Japan loses some of its homogeny. But in all honesty, this isn't unique to Japan. It's been stated, I can't remember where I heard this quote, but I think it's a great quote, that in the world today, due to global communications, teenagers all over the world are more like each other than they are like their parents. And that's no less true in Japan than anywhere else. Christianity in Japan. According to Michael Ashcroft and Mark Ellis on a GodReports.com blog, Japan is one of the most secularized nations in the world. Because loyalty is one of their core values, Japanese see leaving their traditional Buddhism and Shintoism as a betrayal to their family. The average Christian church only has 30 members, and those members are graying. There was a little surge in Christianity being adopted after World War II. The authors state that missionaries know that Japan is a country where missionary dreams go to die. Burnout with few converts is especially common. The Japanese may be one of the toughest peoples to convert due to the nature of their society. They place so much emphasis on loyalty to their society that the value of individual salvation is foreign to them. The authors on God Reports see room for hope, however. Japanese society is tough on those who can't keep up, and suicide rates are high. God is always attractive to the hurting. The gospel message of God's love, along with gospel music, has taken root in the bigger cities who do have thriving Christian congregations. As individuality continues to assert its growth in Japan, so does access to individual salvation.